Different individuals have come to Britain for very different reasons. We see immigrants as people who came to escape either persecution or poverty. But each immigrant makes a personal journey. The variety of experiences of the 7 people in this film also reflect the way Britain has changed. In 1945, a confident country welcomed anyone who could help with the labour shortage. But in the 1960s, prejudice increased, especially towards Indians and blacks. Over the years, different immigrants have met with different receptions. Chaim Bermant came to escape the Nazis. Donald McCamley came from Ireland for work. Igor Pomerantsev was expelled from Russia by the KGB. Roy Saw came from British Guyana to get an education. Ruby Udine came from Bangladesh to join her husband. Josephine Thomas came from Grenada to find work. Kim Quach fled Vietnam as a 12-year-old child. Jewish refugee children in the 1930s followed a tradition of Jews who fled here to avoid persecution. Chaim Bermant was 7 years old when his father had been a rabbi in Poland, got a job in Glasgow. Chaim travelled from Poland via Berlin, Ostend and Dover to Scotland when, in 1937, his father sent for his family. Before leaving, they celebrated one last Passover in Poland with relatives.
We were due to leave in July. Passover must have been April, and this was really in the form of a family reunion because we knew that we would never see each other again, not because we anticipated the Holocaust, but because in those days when you went abroad, you stayed abroad, people didn't come and go visiting. And so my grandparents were there, uncles, aunts, cousins. Grandmother must have had a large house because I remember we all sat around a vast table, and although children always find joy in numbers, I couldn't, even though I was 8, avoid being aware of the certain air of melancholy about the whole gathering. And in fact, we never did see them again. And it was in 1944 that we heard that they had all perished. All the people who had been around that table, my grandmother, uncles, aunts, cousins, very young cousins, most of them, that they'd all died in the Holocaust. Most of them in that very house, in the cellar of the house in which we had the seder.
How did they die in the cellar?
Well, they were all hiding in the cellar, and one of the children began crying. And the Germans who were upstairs threw some hand grenades down.
What was the most harrowing memory that you had then as a child?
I see it clearly to this day. We were passing the old Jewish cemetery on the way out of Breslov to Borovka, and there was a young girl of 18 crying over her grandmother's grave. And I asked, why she was crying. And apparently her parents had moved on to America. In those days, if you had a child who was backward or ill, you couldn't get to America. She was backward, and she had therefore been abandoned by her parents and had lived with her grandparents. But her grandmother was now dead also. There was none left to her in the world, and she was crying over her grandmother's grave.
What did you think as an 8-year-old child as you saw that?
Well, at first I couldn't understand it, but then, the grief, the agony of it all became very clear to me. I remember it to this very day. It was the most painful memory of my young life. From Poland to Borovka, I went on a cart, like David Copperfield traveled with Barkis, through the villages, through the woods, and then on to Borovka. From Borovka, we went by bus, which was something also quite an exciting occasion, though I had been on a bus before. But the excitement came when we arrived by bus in Dvinsk to the railway station, the Vokzal, a vast, red brick place. I remember to this day, where I had my first sight of trains, huge steaming giants, but I actually was able to ascend on a train. And again, the train was very, very packed. There were 3 classes in those days, first class, second class, and as they called them, Chaza class. Wooden benches, about as rough as this, but to me it was all very exciting. I couldn't keep still. I rushed up and down the train. I kept pushing my head out of the window. My mother was half in a panic that I would have my head knocked off by the tunnels. My face was covered with soot because of the smoke from the train, but I enjoyed every minute of it. I remember every carriage. I remember the people sitting there. I remember wandering into the second-class compartment and seeing people smoking what looked like large objects wrapped in brown paper. It's my first glimpse of a cigar.
So you weren't frightened? You were having a good time as a little boy?
A very exciting time for a boy to be on the train, for a boy who had never seen a train.
What was arriving in Berlin like?
Well, again, my mother grew rather worried as we got near Berlin, because we kids had a habit of sort of playing at Nazis, Heil Hitler and so on, that sort of thing. and she was in a panic in case she'd do the same thing when we got to Germany. And as we got into Germany, the trains became very crowded indeed, because there's a lot of troop movements there. You know, there was the Munich crisis, the Czech crisis, and so on, and there were soldiers everywhere, and the train was full of soldiers. I had nowhere to sit. But in fact, one of the German soldiers took me on his knee for a large part of the journey.
And he knew you were Jewish?
I don't know if he knew I was Jewish. I must have looked fairly Jewish because, you know, we came from this small shtetl. I of course, had my head covered and had side curls and so on, so I imagine he must have known I was Jewish. And we didn't breathe easily again until we were out of Germany and into Belgium.
And when you reached Belgium, what do you remember most about
Well, the
that?
most exciting thing in Belgium was my first taste of an orange. We had one orange between the five of us. We all had one segment, but the taste is nothing I'd tasted before. Luscious, fresh, I suppose taste of heaven, so to speak.
And then what was the sea crossing like?
Sea crossing was a bit of a disappointment because I thought we were going to America or something like America, and I'd heard stories about voyages lasting for days and so on, and the excitement of it. This particular journey lasted for a few hours, and I was sick for most of the time. It was a crossing between Ostend and Dover.
Did you rush towards your father when you got to Glasgow station?
Well, when he left Latvia, he'd been a sort of a Hamisher rabbi with side locks, long beard, and a very shaggy one. I mean, he never applied a scissor to it ever. And he also wore a Beckershire, as we called it, a long Prince Albert coat. You know, the jacket went down to his knees and so on. In Glasgow, his side curls, which used to go behind his ears, had vanished. Although he still had a long beard, it was neatly trimmed. And he wore a double-breasted suit. He was in mufti and looked almost a mortal like other mortals. But I regarded my father as someone more elevated than that.
Were there any advantages to being a foreign refugee in Glasgow when you were a little boy?
Well, I wasn't a refugee. I was a foreigner, or rather outlandish and so on. I was very conscious of it. There was a disadvantage in that the kids, I wore with great pride my Sunday suit, which was sort of +4s and so on. And kids laughed at my outfit. I had no tie, my jacket buttoned up to the top. And my hair was cropped, because all kids crop their hair in the summer, in case of lice. And kids laughed at me.
In Latvia?
In Latvia. But the teachers were extremely good to me, and assigned special kids to look after me. And as a foreigner, I was something of a celebrity. You know, I was invited out to tea, I was invited to parties and so on. I wanted to meet Chaim Bermant. Or actually, on the advice of an aunt, she said nobody can pronounce Chaim. You've got to get yourself a nice Scottish name, call yourself Jaime. And from about 1938 until I went to university, I was known as Chaim Bermant rather than Chaim Bermant. And then I sort of cashed in my status as a foreigner. I enjoyed it, I gloried in it. And then suddenly in September there came an immense influx of youngsters from Germany and Austria, Jewish youngsters. And they all cleared my pitch.